Hey everyone, Percy Jules here. So today I'd like to talk about Presonus. Now, Presonus, a few hours ago, they made a huge announcement. I saw it live on YouTube, and they actually announced two things. So one of the things they announced was something that many of us already expected, or at least suspected, and that is the release of Studio One version 5. So Studio One version 5 has been released today. Not really surprising, but very exciting. Now, of course, they released or they added some really nice features. I have to say I haven't been able to upgrade yet because I haven't been able to log into my account, probably because it's pretty busy on their website. But from what I've seen and what I've heard and what I read, some really nice, interesting new features. So, for example, they overhauled all the native plugins, so all the built-in plugins. So they gave it a new look, but also they added some really nice, very useful features. Also, they added a notation view. So you have the edit view, a piano roll view, but now also you have a notation view. I'm not sure if that's the official name of it, but I think you know what I mean. So Presonus also has a software package called Notion, which is a notation software package. And some of the features from Notion are now integrated into Studio One. So that's a very nice nice touch, even though personally I don't really use notations all that much, but still it's nice to have. Now, one of the biggest new features is what they call the show page. So the show page is really aimed at live performances. So what you can do is you can create a set list of songs that you've previously recorded in Studio One. You can then mix live instruments with virtual instruments, pre-recorded instruments. You can add elements from the library of Studio One. So you can really mix it up. I have to say it kind of reminds me of the clips page in Digital Performer. Not sure exactly to what degree it's very similar or to what degree it differs, because as I mentioned, I haven't been able to test it out yet, really. But it really reminds me of that. So I think you could say that this is Studio One's way of optimizing Studio One for live performances. Now, one of my favorite new features, of course, again, still have to test it out, but it sounds like it's going to be one of my favorite new features, is what is called, I think it is called something like mix scenes. But anyway, what it is, so of course, when you're mixing a song, you're making all kinds of changes to things like volume, panning, insert effects, send effects, etc., etc. Now, what you can do with this feature is you can make a snapshot of all those settings, or you can select certain settings. And of course, at a later moment, you can recall those settings. So for example, let's say you're mixing a song, and at one point you're thinking, okay, I'm not sure if this is really it, if this is the way to go. Well, what you can do is you can make a snapshot and then change everything up, make a new mix, so to speak, and then you can switch back and forth between those two mixes to see which one is better. That's just one example. But anyway, I think for me personally, anyway, it's a very useful, it sounds like a very useful tool to have. Now, another very nice sounding feature is what is called the listen bus. And the listen bus is a signal from your mix that is independent from your main output and which is used just for listening. And why that might be useful is, for example, there are some plugins that you might want to use for to make better mixing decisions with, but you don't necessarily want them to influence your final mix. So for example, there are some plugins that simulate different listening environments. So you have a plugin that simulates listening to your mix in a car or listening to your mix on a smartphone, things like that. Or you have those, room calibration plugins. Again, very useful for mixing, so that you can make better decisions for your mixes. But again, you don't want them to influence your final mix. So that is why the listen bus might be very, very useful. So all in all, as you might expect from a release like this, some really interesting new features. There's a bunch more, but I'm not going to go over all of them. But Presonus also made a second announcement. And that announcement might have even caught my attention a little bit more. And I'm going to tell you why. Now, the announcement is that they have also released what they call Presonus Sphere. Now, what is Presonus Sphere? Now, Presonus Sphere is a platform, and I hope I'm not selling it short by calling it a collaboration platform, but that is basically what it is, I believe. So what you can do is you can subscribe. It's a subscription model, and when you do, you can of course create music. But you can also collaborate with others, you can share ideas, you can share whatever, you can communicate with one another, communicate with experts, and so on. Now, that idea in and of itself, of course, is not really new. I mean, there are other platforms where you can collaborate with others. So Splice, for example, BandLab, so there are other platforms. Now, I have to say again, it's a subscription model, and if you do subscribe, you also get some tools, and I have to say, you get quite a bit of tools. It's pretty impressive, I have to admit. So one of the tools you get is Studio One Professional. So that is pretty amazing, isn't it? So the interesting thing about it is that they themselves actually said, even though I know that Presonus Sphere is not only about the tools, but they themselves said, okay, now there are two ways of getting access to Studio One Professional. And that is either to buy a license, like we have been used to, or you can subscribe to Presonus Sphere and get access to Studio One that way. Now, again, in and of itself, amazing. That's great. But now my question is, and I hope I'm not thinking ahead too much or too pessimistically maybe, but my question is, what is Presonus up to? I mean, is this the beginning of them moving more and more towards a subscription model and moving away from just purchasing licenses like so many other companies do? Is that it? I hope not. Because I have to say, I'm not really a fan of subscription models. Not when it comes to something like this, like software, like DAWs or video editing software. You know, I don't really feel comfortable with subscribing to that. You know, I mean, I don't want my access to software like that be dependent on me paying a fee every month. You know, it's just a kind of unsettling thought. I feel much more comfortable just buying a license and then owning that product for life. Now, of course, I'm speculating a little bit here. No one has said that Presonus is planning to do that. And I have to say, as long as they keep those two options open, so for you to have a choice between, you know, buying a license or subscribing to them to get access to Studio One, that is amazing. That is really great. But if they were to move towards subscription models, to be honest, I would be a little bit disappointed. Anyway, that's about it, about the announcements of today. My choice is pretty clear. I'm going to upgrade to Studio One 5 Professional as soon as I get access to my account. And I expect it to be great. I mean, I've been using Studio One for, 4 or 5 years, something like that. I've been very content, so no complaints. And again, I expect this upgrade to be no less. Anyway, let me know what you think about Studio One 5, or if you have any thoughts on Presonus Sphere, let me know, leave a comment below. For now, I want to thank you for watching, and I will talk to you in the next video.